Hello and good day or good night. Today I'll read a section of The Medieval Underworld by Andrew McCall that kind of jumped out at me when I was reading it earlier. So let's begin. No less remarkable than the supposed confessions of the sevenfold witches are those which were apparently extracted from some of the 34 people who were charged with devil worship in the town and neighborhood of Arras in the years 1459 and 1460. If the story of a Dominican named Pierre de Bressart is to be believed, the presence of a large number of diabolists in the district of Artois had first been brought to his notice when he had heard the confession of one Robinet de Val, who had been condemned to be burned to death by the chapter general of the French Dominicans, or Jacobins, which had taken place in 1459 at Langres. According to Pierre de Bressart's version of Robinet's confession, the diabolist had included in the roll of his associates a prostitute named Demoiselle, who lived in Douai, near Arras, and a painter, poet, and composer of religious ditties named Jehan Levite, who was also sometimes known as the Abbot of Little Sense. And so, on his return to Arras, where he was an official includer, Pierre de Bressart had given orders that Demoiselle should be brought to Arras and there tortured before the vicars of the city's bishop. After being tortured several times, Demoiselle finally agreed that she had been at the meeting of the diabolists, or Valdieri, described by Robinet in his confession, and that among the other people that she had recognized there had been Jehan Levite. Lengthy inquiries essentially revealed that Levite was now living in Ponthieu, but when the Inquisitor's men arrived there to arrest him, the man took such fright that he attempted to cut out his tongue. On being brought to Arras in February 1460, Levite was also tortured and forced to make a written deposition in which he gave a long list of the people he remembered as having been present at the Valdieri. Yet, although he was said to have been supplied the names of many prominent merchants, nobles, and ecclesiastics, the only people who were now seized on the strength of his evidence were poor people: 3 more prostitutes, the mistress of the city's baths, a barber, and a sergeant in the service of the city council. At this point, the vicars of the Bishop of Arras seem to have tried to put a stop to the proceedings by suggesting that the prisoners be set free at Easter. But to this proposal, the dean of the Church of Notre Dame de Arras, Jacques Dubois, who then had taken charge of the investigation, refused to give his consent, and said he sought an interview with the Count of Étampes, who he persuaded to come to Arras and tell the bishop's vicars that if they would not deal with the prisoners as it was their duty to do, he himself would take charge of the case. This was a serious threat to the bishop's privileges, so reluctantly the vicars allowed their colleague Jacques to return the accused prisoners to the torture chamber, where still more names were extracted from them of people who had attended the Valdieri. Nor was a second attempt on the part of the vicars to cool Dubois' ardor any more successful than the first, when 2 learned theologians gave it as their opinion that, since the confession made no mention of causing death or abusing the consecrated host, the prisoners should not be too severely punished. Dubois retorted by claiming that he and his ally, the suffragan Bishop of Beirut, had uncovered a plot so villainous that it might well threaten to overthrow the whole world. Indeed, so vicious was the Vaudois, said Dubois, that even those who refused to confess should, if they were accused by 4 or more of the admitted diabolists be sent to the stake. Soon a letter arrived from the Count of Étampes, again urging the bishop's vicars on the cause of God and their duty, and soon after this a large scaffold was put up in the center of Arras, and the prisoners were produced before the public to hear their confessions read out by the inquisitors. On the night of the Valdieri, the citizens of Arras learned from those confessions the diabolists anointed a wooden rod in the palm of their hands with a special imprecation given them by their master the devil. And when they put the rod between their legs, they were whisked away to a meeting presided over by the devil in the shape of a goat, with a human face and a monkey's tail. At these meetings, the Vaudois did homage to the devil, first by offering him either their soul or some other part of their body, and secondly by kissing his arse. Next, they spat and jumped up and down on the cross, profaning the name of Jesus and the Holy Trinity. Then came feasting and drinking, followed by an orgy in which the master participated both as a male and a female. Finally, to conclude the Valdieri, the devil made a hortatory speech, reminding his subjects that they must on no account take part in any of the rites of the Catholic Church. After reading the confessions, the prisoners were asked if they admitted to doing these things, a question to which they all replied loudly and clearly in the affirmative, before being taken away to the town hall. But when they learned that their inheritances had been declared forfeit by the count and their goods to the bishop, that they themselves were sentenced to death, they all at once started to swear that they were innocent, saying that Jacques Dubois had promised them their lives would be saved if they confessed to having done these extraordinary things which he had suggested to them. Yet even though many of the townspeople seem to have been convinced that the charges against them were fabrications, the prisoners had confessed in public to being devil worshippers, and it was too late for the court's decision to be reversed. First to be burned was the aged songwriter Jehan Levite, while de Missel was returned to Dubai for execution of sentence, so that the people there too should be warned against the wickedness of the Vaudois. So far, although it was rumored that more important people had been denounced as Vaudois, those actually arrested had all been people of little social consequence, whose goods and whose inheritances can hardly have been worth a great deal. But now that the first witnesses were safely out of the way, Jacques Dubois was free to use their confessions as a basis for bringing similar charges against more substantial citizens and even nobles. The second series of arrests began on the night of July 16, 1460, and among those subsequently thrown into the bishop's prison were several rich aldermen, the city sergeant, and a nobleman called the Chevalier Payen de Beaufort. Of the many wealthy people who fled the city, some were pursued by the Count of Étampes, men as far as even Paris, and brought back to Arras. Meanwhile, tension in the town continued to mount, until it seemed that the Duke of Burgundy sent words from Brussels to say that no more arrests would be made before some of the accused at least stood trial. In the autumn of 1460, on October 12th, the five most important prisoners were produced before the public, and a concourse of the citizens of Arras were astonished to hear the Chevalier Payen de Beaufort solemnly declare that he had known the prostitutes had been burned to death, and that these ladies had given him some of their special unguent, which he had smeared on himself and on a stick, and that after doing this, he had been transported through the air to a meeting at which he had done homage to the devil, who on this occasion had appeared in the form of an ape, by kissing his paw. He had been led astray by the prostitutes, he said, and even though The revealed application of torture had failed to elicit confessions from any other prisoners. The Chevalier de Beaufort's rank and reputation were sufficient to persuade the court that all those who stood accused must be guilty. But this time, nobody was put to death. Instead, the condemned were given prison sentences of varying length. The Chevalier de Beaufort got 10 years and were ordered to pay heavy fines, the greater part of which went to the bishop's coffers or to the inquisitors. When early in 1461, Jacques Dubois collapsed in a paralytic fit and soon afterwards died, there were those who maintained that his death had been magically caused by the Vaudois. To others, however, it seemed that the sudden demise of the Dean of Notre Dame had been an act of divine retribution. An added weight was given to the latter view when in June 1461 the Court of Parliament of Paris accepted an appeal pleaded before it by counsel for the Chevalier de Beaufort, who claimed that Jacques Dubois had blackmailed his client into confessing by telling him it was the only way in which he could avoid being condemned to be burned as a Vaudois, and so forfeiting all his property, which would otherwise have gone to his widow and his children. Having acquitted the Chevalier de Beaufort, the court ordered that other people who had been found guilty of Vaudieri to be brought to Paris, where, after each of them had been separately examined, they too were all in the end pronounced innocent and had their sentences quashed.